Vince Corsaro, welcome to the pod.
Great to be here. Thanks.
For our listeners, I'll quickly read your bio and then we will jump in. So, Vince facilitates and coaches leaders to balance achievement with authenticity by building strong, meaningful relationships that drive business outcomes and positive ones. With experience as a CEO and senior executive, as well as decades of work with forums and professional associations, he specializes in fostering inclusive, resilient leadership. Known for an engaging and challenging style, he brings warmth, loyalty, and fun to retreats. So, Vince, I understand you just came back from a retreat, but before that, tell us about your book.
So a few years ago, I launched into the idea of how do we provide an end-to-end personal transformation guide. And so that was the birth of a book called Waking Up, 8 Questions That Will Shift Your Life or Help You Do Nothing. It's available out there, but it's primarily for people that work with me.
What's one of those questions?
Oh gosh, what are the facts? What are the facts? What's the story you're telling yourself? When you think of that, how do you feel? And on and on. It's really just a way to provide a structured unpacking process that anyone can use.
What are the facts around your life?
Oh gosh, I spent 25 years in the nonprofit sector, primarily in leadership development. And when that came to a natural close, I started working with independent groups, call them forums, councils, tribes, roundtables. It really doesn't matter. Along with executive teams and management teams for the last 18 years. Have a couple of kids, some grandkids. Life is good. Live in Colorado, California. It's a good time.
And when you say forums, tell our listeners a little more what that means, and then also why not tell us about your favorite type of retreat to host or to facilitate, I should say.
Sure. Yeah, that's a big difference between host and facilitate, which maybe we'll go into. I enjoy doing retreats that where I guess the phrase I use is I like to work with people that want to work. So if we're just coming together to kind of fluff it around or taste wine or do whatever, it's fine, but that's not a retreat that I'm likely to facilitate. I want to combine the use of the outdoors, the use of informal spaces, and then weave into that opportunities to explore and reflect on my life and build the group. So a forum can be any group of people. Primarily the defining concept is that it's a confidential container. So we're not typically best friends, but we are people that really value the confidentiality of the space.
How do you show up at a retreat you facilitate?
How do you want me to show up? The phrase I use here is facilitate from a step behind. So my job and any facilitator's job is really to meet the group where they're at, right? To match their energy, to find what's the thing that's perhaps blocking them and kind of weave our way or navigate our way through that.
And what have you found blocks people from showing up in a way that you would expect?
Fear, fear of exposure, fear that vulnerability will lead to exposure, the risks engaged with showing up, and the fear that I might be voted off the island. It almost always boils down to fear. So when we can face it, we can name it, we can allow it to be like a wave where it comes in and it goes out.
So that touches on your retreat flow. You walked me through your retreat flow, and I was really impressed in the kind of framework you created. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, it starts for me. Priya Parker wrote a book a few years ago called The Art of Gathering, which really became a guidebook for me. But it starts more at the purpose. Why are we gathering? And that has to be answered. And then who are the people that are coming? Where are they at? What's the thing that they want to get out of it? If you don't start there, then no matter what you do, it's a hit or miss thing. So I got to start there. And then I go through a progression, right? In a way, it's thinking of we move from the familiar to the unfamiliar. We move from the unknown to the known. And so we want to capture what are people coming from? How do we create an opportunity to open up, to take a risk, take a challenge that's small, get out and do some fun stuff, and then connect at a deeper level and explore some areas that maybe we don't talk about in other places. And then so I phrase this as we do it down and in, and then an up and out, where I'm making new commitments and whatnot.
So what do you do when an executive team, forum is a little easier. So forums are small little boards of advisors within organizations like YPO, Vistage, and so forth. But what do you do when an executive team, obviously different vibe, maybe a little more buttoned up, maybe a little more concerned in how they show up. What do you do to kind of break the ice and kind of introduce them to that safety? Because like you said, they're maybe looking behind their back to see, who's judging them and kind of controlling a little bit how they show up.
Sure, there's always power in the room, in my opinion. Whether it's a forum, there's the richest guy in the forum, or in an executive team, there's the CEO there. So you have to strip out power. You have to figure out that we're all people, right? And we're all human. And we all want to share our stories. And so for me, when I can help a group share their own stories at whatever level of risk is appropriate, it doesn't matter whether you're a team or a forum or a group of peer executives. But power is the key thing there. And I have to sometimes, almost always, start with the CEO before I ever go into their team. and really come to an agreement that when the CEO opens their mouth, conversation stops. So we have to embrace that. And so I put a gag on them so that because I want people to feel free to open up. And there's an appropriate authenticity that comes in a work environment. There's no question about that.
So you just came back from Costa Rica, keeping the confidentiality of the group as tightly as possible. This is fresh off your mind. Tell us what you learned in that.
Oh, it's not as tight as possible. It's tight. But what really the elements that I would share is that the place was super conducive. We were out in the jungle in Costa Rica, super nice accommodations, sleeping arrangements were excellent, and the outdoors was just unparalleled. We were able to take a hike up and look at some volcanoes down in the area. So we swam in not heated, but a thermal river. One of my big things here is we always want to do something that has a little risk to it, so that we're actually modeling through activity a physical risk, perceived risk. We never put people in dangerous situations, but we want to create a little bit of a risk physically so that then we can open up the space for a little more risk emotionally.
What's an example of such a risk?
Activity? Yeah, it really varies by the group. For some people, walking for 20 minutes, even a yoga class where I had on this retreat, I had 2 or 3 in the group that had never done a yoga class. So for them, that was a risk, right? To show up and do something they'd never done before. Whitewater rafting, rock climbing, rappelling. You asked me in our last conversation about what will I not lead, and that is anything that has real risk, and that I want to make sure that we have professionals leading anything that has any sort of physical risk, of any kind of likelihood, any kind of severity. I want professionals doing that, and so I work with the group to design that, right, and to design the flow between kind of the emotional exploration and then the physical exploration.
When we spoke, you talked about the importance of the space. But before I touch on that, I want to talk about just some people are even scared to take their shirt off or show up in a bathing suit. How do we create a space that's okay for that and non-judgmental, given body dysmorphia or whatever people might go through personally?
Yeah, that's it's a real great question, and it has to do with retreat flow. That's never the first activity, right? I wouldn't open up a session in a swimming pool because of just that reason, or a river. I want there to be some disclosure. There's a question that I ask often at the beginning of who are you, who am I, and what might we do together? And we have to get that out on the table before we show our bodies or do something that we've never done.
What do you do if someone just doesn't want to do it?
I always give people a couple of opportunities to say no. I never take no the first time, but I want to explore what's the block, what's the fear, what's the bad thing that might happen. And most often I can help somebody walk through it by naming the fear, by the group around them welcoming each of us wherever we're at. And if somebody gives me a no 2 or 3 times, then I let them off and let them observe or give them another role during the activity. It happens, and I never shame anybody for that. But I want to make sure I didn't take the first no.
So jumping into the space, we talked so much about the space and how important that is for you.
100%.
Activities is one thing, but let's talk about the space. What do you look
Yeah.
for in the right space?
You know, I've already said this, but I think it's really important to remember that purpose comes first. That's why we're gathering. The people, what's going on with the people is second. The program, the activities, the things that we're doing, the conversation we're having goes third. And then it's place. Place needs to support all 3 of those. And so, as you mentioned a minute ago, I do place a very high importance on this meeting space itself. It's got to be warm. It's got to be homey. It's got to be welcoming. It has to be soft. From there, I prefer spaces that have an outdoor accessible, where there's good light. I want to make sure the sleeping arrangements are just unquestionable, unless we're using sleeping as a part of the discomfort or the challenge of a retreat. But for the most part, the groups I work with, I want sleeping areas to not be, not in any way detract from the experience. And I want the kitchen, as I mentioned to you when we spoke, I want it to be group-centered. I really don't prefer to have groups sit down at a table and simply be served. I like the opportunity, at least, to get in the kitchen together. I'm Italian, so the Italian kitchen is really important. And getting in and kind of mixing it up, and even having some chop challenge kinds of things.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. I did one a few years ago where groups took on different courses. Everybody had to include kale in the course, and it was amazingly creative.
I had 2 friends on the Chopped show.
Oh, right.
Either one, but I forget the secret ingredient.
Yeah.
So I freaking love that. We talked about cooking classes, and so you're basically saying I don't want every meal catered.
100%. If we can. I mean, to me, I can work in any environment, but if you talk about how do I want to maximize environment, for me, food is super important. It's a way we connect. It's very human.
We talked about hospitality in a welcoming environment. I believe that in order to create a sense of belonging, the first step is hospitality. You got to be able to walk into a place and, kick your shoes off. When you look at this meeting space, what specifically are you looking at from a design perspective?
Probably the 2 top responses there is it's got to be soft seating, it's got to be conducive to a circle, it's got to be nice light, outdoor light if possible. I don't like a lot of fluorescent, just keep it. When I use the word soft, that's what I'm looking for. And I've had some really horrific spaces, and most hotels that I work in hate me because I come in and I move furniture, and even in this Costa Rica thing, I was taking furniture out of the lobby and putting it into our meeting space because it's just not going to work if that is a difficult. Oh, they were so. They were a bit frustrated with me, but I don't care. I'm there to create an experience that gets the group what they want. How does that land? How does that land for you? The idea of soft and warm and homey. I'm just curious.
So, my last company was event design software. I basically created the world's first
Right.
collaborative software for floor plans, and one of the things we did is integrate all the different furniture rentals into the software because of how important the space is. And I completely agree. One of the mistakes we made in designing the first assemble was having kind of hard chairs inside the meeting room. Sure, they swivel and you can move them around easily because they're pretty light, but you got to be able to have more than 24 by 24 inches on a seat in order to get comfortable. Some people may want to sit on the floor. Some people may want to pace around. And I've always believed that you have to give all those different, you have to create the vessel for
Yeah.
for that space, because
Yeah, 100%.
that's how you create comfort, and therefore as a result you create vulnerability.
I can't say I create vulnerability with that, but I sure promote the idea of it. You know, if I'm taking my shoes off in a space and I'm barefoot, I often sit on the floor as a facilitator so that I'm somewhat below the group's eye level. I never want to stand in front of a group and teach, right? It looks like a teacher. So I want the space to speak to safety. And I believe that if people judge that the place is safe, then they will share. They'll go to a vulnerable place.
You hit the nail on the head, because in my belonging framework, hospitality is first and safety is second.
Yeah.
Because a great, hospitable, warm environment creates safety, and then safety creates engagement, and
Yeah.
engagements create commitment.
I'm very big on the idea that safety, in my opinion, is not a feeling. Safety is a judgment. We decide, is it safe
Say
to go
more
down?
about that.
Well, think about, you're going to go down a dark street in an unfamiliar city. You're going to decide, is this a safe place for me to go down? Is it safe for me to walk down that street? To me, it's exactly the same in a group setting or in a facilitated event. I am constantly, my risk manager on the inside is constantly assessing, is it safe for me to show up?
So it sounds like, unlike most facilitators, you really think about the retreat design as a whole.
I don't know how you can't. And unfortunately, often facilitators are just hired in for, come in at 9, leave at 6, or whatever the time is. And I believe we sometimes can get too focused on our agenda. I want to take a step back from the agenda and really look at the purpose. What are we wanting in terms of the people? I often will design a retreat from end to end. In fact, I was doing this morning, where I'm designing it from end to end, but I'm only going to be there for about half of it. My preference is to be there from beginning to end, but if that doesn't work out logistically or with my schedule, I want to make sure that the group and I have thoughtfully designed the experience.
When do you step away?
From the group?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yesterday, I just did this with the group in Costa Rica. I almost always will put them in some sort of a circle. Yesterday I had everybody with their arms around each other. I call it the kumbaya moment. I don't always do it. But when I create those closings, I want them to be in their circle. And so I stand outside of that. And sometimes it's very emotional because I've walked through this experience with them. But the reality is I'm not a part of their group. So I want to make sure that as we leave, or as I leave, that group feels solid in who they are. I really pay attention to, it's not what happens while I'm with them, it's how am I setting them up for their next conversations, for their next engagement together. It's really not my show. If it at all looks like I'm doing a show, then in my opinion I failed. And what I'm about is, how do I set this group up so that as they go through their work in the next coming months or year, that I've somehow helped them raise their bar.
Do they often reach out for continuing kind of assistance?
Yeah. I've been with some groups for 10 or 15 years even. And it's not even assistant. I'm a partner. I'm a resource to the group. So yeah, I did their 2 or 3 day retreat, but I've got a mountain of resources and exercises and book recommendations. I get accused sometimes. It's like, Vince, can you never say anything without giving us a book reference? And my answer is no. I want to give you the book reference so that you can take responsibility for your own learning. And it's just not about what I give you. It's about, how do I create an environment and a space for you to grow and learn as you want.
Sounds like you honor other people's work and don't kind of try to take credit for everything.
I almost think it's laughable when any of us copyright anything in this space, because I was with a group from Asia not too long ago, and they showed me their group norms, kind of their agreements, and I had written it. I had never seen the group before, but somehow the work I had done in writing had made its way around the world, and that is awesome. Like when I first
how did that make
looked,
you feel?
well, I just laughed. Because I don't believe any of us have full authorship over anything. We are all an accumulation of experiences,
100%.
and we integrate. I rarely follow one book to the letter, but I integrate the learning, the nuggets from that book into the Priya Parker book, Art of Gathering, super helpful, integrating in to what we already did, but it kind of validates some of the thought process that I invite groups into.
One of my favorite Priya Parker terms is conscious exclusivity. This idea that we are an exclusive group that's consciously exclusive, because when you do that, you're at least intentional about how you include or not include other people.
Yeah, 100%. That actually speaks to the power comment I made a few minutes ago, that I carefully manage power. And so that has to do with, are we level alike, or just how is that showing up in the room, and we bring it out.
So talking about the different pieces you introduce into your facilitated work, when you think about the resources you have at your disposal, and we talked about how the world is your oyster, what is your favorite type of book or framework that you recommend the most?
Well, two accusations I get. One is, Vince, can't you say anything without a book? And the second is, Vince, can't you say anything without a framework? And it speaks to the same idea that I'm putting the responsibility for learning into your court. So with any book, it's, how does this integrate? I mean, I don't want to be too crass, but how does it give me a nugget or a quote that I can use? Because I just think it is important to acknowledge that there's a lot of great stuff in the
Is there
space
one? Like,
of
which
group
one
work.
comes to mind? I mean, for me, it's like Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions.
Well, sure. The idea that organizational health trumps everything else, which is Lencioni's whole basic idea, I think is important. I have other books that really separate out the idea of context, or how we're working together, and content, meaning what we're working on. So all of them integrate. I don't have a one. I probably have 100, and I want to bring in the author or the resource that meets this group's need.
Do you have a favorite that you've
You're gonna push me on a favorite, and it's.
I mean, I can share mine.
If I really wanted to push into that, it would be the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership by a group. I know all three authors: Jim Detmer, Kaylee Klemp, and Diana Chapman, and it encapsulates many of the concepts that I believe around the idea of commitments in general, where commitments aren't actions, they're pathways. They're the thing that guides my steps and helps me make decisions. So when we can do that consciously, which is what they've written about, I think we're halfway home to whatever transformation we're wanting in our life. So there, I did it. I gave you one.
Kaylee Klemp, she's wonderful, and she's going to be hopefully a guest here soon.
Yeah, she is.
What
No argument.
what struggles do you have in finding new clients, if any?
When I first started in this work, everybody said, you got to write a book, or you have to have product, or blah, blah. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. My strategy has been do good work. And I've never had a problem with getting work. I focus on maximizing this experience, doing this work, and doing good work. And 18 years later, I haven't missed a meal, and I love what I do.
So if you don't implement, how do you know you did a good job?
If I don't implement, meaning if
If you don't go afterwards, to sit there with the organization and kind of.
Oh, right. I open the door for that everywhere, and most everybody appreciates that I look at this as a relationship, not an event. And so when we start something, I'm always there. I'm going to have a conversation with the leader from this group this week, because they want to change some of their structure, their meeting structure. I can help them with that, and I do that. And I think people appreciate, again, that idea that this is a relationship, not a transactional event. I think all groups need that and benefit from that, right? We have enough transactional stuff in our lives.
So I imagine you have conversations prior to the facilitated gathering.
Oh yeah.
Prior.
I have conversations. Sometimes I almost always open a door for communication. whether it's a written survey, whether it's a conversation. I want to discover if there's anything anybody has that they haven't said to the group, and so that I go in knowing that I've got an issue. I've gone into groups in the past where I knew that there was some sort of breach of confidentiality. Maybe it was just a near miss, but something had leaked out, and it hadn't been addressed in the forum. And so that's a process, really, of how do we create enough safety so that those hidden issues come out. Because in my world, if you have an uncleared issue in the background, forget about vulnerability.
You know, when we think about confidentiality, I think about 3 levels of confidentiality. The first one is only speak about it with the group. The second one is only speak about it when the person is present. And the third is speak about it never.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense to me. I weigh heavily here on permission. Whatever it is, at any of those 3 levels, do I have permission? And I invite people to ask for permission. It's like, hey, is it okay? Are you open to some feedback? Are you open to my observation? You know, what is it that might be blocking you, and is there a way I can help you with that? I am real big on asking for permission, not just assuming either that it's there or not there. Confidentiality has to be Loctite.
So as we look to wrap up here, what are some, what is some feedback you have for people who may want to get into this field, or people in the field that may be struggling a little bit in finding their voice?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I do get calls all the time from people that are curious. How do I get into the space? And if their next sentence is, I have a lot to teach, or I have a lot to bring, or I want to give back into my industry or my community, I almost always run the other way. Because if you're coming this with that I have something to teach, it's really hard to shift that to the idea that I said earlier of leading from a step behind and meeting the group where they're at. Teaching and facilitating to me are, 2 completely different paths.
Yeah, for one, you have to shut up.
Exactly. That's my goal, is if I can ask a question, that's it.
Yeah.
So
thousands of dollars for a couple questions.
I know, and people laugh at me about that, but I don't care.
So how do you set your pricing?
Gosh, that is a good question. I do make sure that I am consistent, and that so many people know so many people, and if they hear, if I'm like an airline where one seat costs X and the seat next to it costs 2X, I lose all credibility and integrity, in my opinion. So I'm very transparent and equal, because I know all these people talk to each other, and I want it to be valued. I want people to value the experience. So I love the idea of value-based consulting as opposed to transaction or time-based consulting. And that's guided my steps on that for a long time.
Favorite retreat you've done? Where was it, and why was it your favorite?
Say it again. My favorite retreat?
Favorite retreat, and where was it, and why was it your favorite?
Oh, gosh. People ask me this question all the time. They ask me that, and they ask me, are we your favorite group? Or how do we stack up to the rest of your groups? And I rarely answer either, because in my view, every event has value. And so, and that value may not always be in that moment, but if I can open up a space, then that's good. So
That's the most avoided answer I've ever heard.
It was pretty good, huh?
Okay, so favorite retreat location?
For me, it's that idea of the outdoors. Do we have accessibility to the outdoors? I think the outdoors provides a metaphor for life, because how we do anything, in my opinion, is how we do everything. And so if I can help somebody or move somebody into an uncomfortable or an unfamiliar place in the outdoors, it goes straight into how do I approach my life. So mountains, ocean, rivers. I'm not as big on the desert, but I can use the desert. I've done retreats, out on a platform in the middle of the desert where people were sleeping in tents. So it has to have the outdoors.
So Vince, how can people find you?
If you know my name, you can find me just about like anybody in the world. I have a website. And you know what? Give me a call or write me an email. I'm super accessible. And again, I want to connect with people. I want to create a relationship. And I
Awesome.
have. Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Well, I really appreciate you
it-
being on here. Any final thoughts?
just I encourage you. I know what you're about in terms of creating the space, creating a place for people to grow, and I think that's awesome. And I'm very encouraging of the work you're contemplating and that you're doing, and I hope that, and I believe you do have a nice concept between purpose and program, and that place has to support program and program has to support purpose. And in this conversation and others, I believe you have that understanding, even if you use slightly different language. So thank you. Go get them. Make the world a better place.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll say that we do have that integrated activity selection with 35 activities. So we try to
Yeah.
make the life of people like you a little easier to at least give you an a la carte menu to choose.
Yeah, love it.
I'm grateful for you being on the pod. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. Take care.